Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone? Good evening. I guess I should say Duke Farr is here, Richard Copperthwaite, with my I can't get this baseball hat right. I certainly thought it was a good time to wear my Expos hat because the Expos are in the news, an issue we'll get into. Sorry it's a little crooked. Anyway, and I'm solo. Sorry about that. Believe me, I tried. It's summer. Nighthawk's unavailable. Dave Handy. I thought the weather might give us Mr. Dave Handy tonight, but it looks like the thunderstorm that moved through the area has moved out. So I suspect the golfers are probably doing their thing. So in any case, I apologize. I tried a number of folks, couldn't get anybody. So, hey, you're stuck with me. What can I say? And I guess I should note now, of course, it's an hour-and-a-half show, and I'd love phone calls. I would especially love phone calls tonight. Our number, 528-5315, our usual number. So you could certainly help me out with calls, but if things are pretty quiet, I'll certainly try to hang in for an hour, but an hour and a half might be stretching it. But anyway, hopefully we'll have some fun. I guess I'll start with the weather. I said I thought Dave Handy might join us because Weather Service had posted a severe thunderstorm warning for parts of northwestern Vermont. Looks like that storm has just gone by. I was out at Camp Kilcare State Park till about 4:30 or 5 or so. And I could see the storm coming in from New York over Lake Champlain. Saw one lightning bolt as I looked to the west. Heard some thunder. But St. Albans just got a glancing blow. That severe thunderstorm warning was touching parts of Chittenden County. I know there was, I guess, a big tree down in Burlington, some damage over in Essex County, New York, across the lake. So it sounded like some pretty strong storms. But fortunately, it looks like at least most of Franklin County escaped that storm damage. So again, here we are. Let me just start with some headlines. And again, anybody who's good enough to call in, happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But again, the Expo's in the news with this, sounds like, I guess if you're an Expo fan, you're real happy about it, but with maybe kind of a crazy notion between the Expos and Tampa Bay Rays, kind of splitting their season. Again, I'm saying don't hold your breath. In fact, I purposely just heard a radio interview just a little while ago on CJAD, Montreal's great English language information station, and Steve Brontman. And if you know the Montreal Expos, the name Brontman should ring a bell. And Brontman was talking about this. Aaron Rand, I think, was the interviewer. And he made it sound like, hey, he thought this was a good idea. Again, the kind of the sketchy proposal. Of course, Tampa Bay, as we've talked about, horrible attendance. I mean, these guys draw nothing down there. It's the team's an embarrassment attendance-wise, and as Nighthawk has talked about often, I mean, the great thing for Montreal would be if we could just get the major leagues to concede defeat on the Tampa Bay Rays and move them to Montreal. And if they're part of the American League East, as we've talked about a number of times, having natural rivals, the Red Sox, Yankees, Blue Jays, probably filling up the stadium in Montreal. I mean, it sounds like a perfect fit. But again, this kind of crazy idea at this point is for both, Tampa Bay, build a new stadium. Montreal, you guys build a new stadium, and you'll split the games. I heard Buster Olney on 101.3, the fine sports show that our friend Nick has worked on down the road a bit. Buster Olney, the great baseball guy who some folks may not realize. He's a Vermont kid. I grew up on a dairy farm in Randolph Center, Vermont, one of your top baseball people in the country. He, of course, was asked about the Montreal-Tampa thing, and he said his word was a mirage. You know, I'm not holding my breath, as I told the Nighthawk many times, and he'd kill. I'd love to see baseball come back to Montreal, but this sounds like absolute pipe dream material, and I'd love to get reaction from anybody out there. Maybe there are some folks who see this much more seriously than myself, but we're talking both these places building new stadiums. It's been, I've been in the Tropicana where the Rays play one time for a Duke Kentucky basketball game in the 1990s. Horrible baseball stadium. As most folks up here know, the Big O in Montreal, not a good baseball stadium, obviously. They need probably a new downtown stadium. So again, I'm hearing Steve Brontman just about an hour ago, live on CJAD, saying, hey, I'm a glass half full guy. any interest it's doable, is what he said. I just don't see it. It just sounds like a crazy idea. Even if both these cities were moving right now and trying to build a new stadium, we're talking 3 years, and I just don't see this happening. Again, I'm just checking my notes now. Bronfman did say, I'm not really up to speed with the Rays' legal constraints. Well, for starters, I think the St. Petersburg mayor, I'm under the impression, hasn't commented or has made it clear that he or she wants nothing to do with this. And the Players Union, you tell me, the Major League Players Union, one of the most powerful unions out there, I think. They're going to want, players on Tampa Bay / Montreal to spend half their time for home games in Montreal, half in Tampa Bay. So good luck getting the Players Union to ever agree to anything like this. So anyway, it sounds pretty crazy to me, but hey, what do I know? Anyway, just some other headline topics. The Boston Celtics. I'm a Celtics guy. That's the one Boston sports team that the Nighthawk and I share allegiance to. The Celtics, much in the news with a season that's just kind of went down the tubes. This was a team that many people, most experts, I think, had predicted would make it to the NBA Finals, at least this last season, and things just fell apart. And we've had some spirited discussions on this show. It's one topic that Nick Mumley and I disagree on, and Nick's top guy. He's outstanding with his sports stuff, very smart kid, but we totally disagree on Kyrie. I think his line is, hey, someone that talented, and Kyrie is nothing if not very talented. But I just think Kyrie was a disaster, not a good fit, a horrible fit for Boston. Go away, which it looks like he's going to do. And Nick said, hey, someone that talented, you have to try to keep him. In any case, Kyrie's gone. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Jackie McMullen, and I'm not sure what she does these days, but a top Boston sports person, used to write for the Boston Globe. I saw some comments she had made just saying Kyrie didn't like Boston. He didn't like living there. I guess didn't like anything about it. And it certainly showed. He was not a good fit for the Celtics. This last season was, again, just a horror show. I'll give you, this is I'll get into some more of this column, but just on the Celtics, this is Dan Shaughnessy, the great Boston Globe columnist in last Sunday's Globe. And he gets into David Ortiz first, but I'll get into some other aspects of the column. But the headline, topping the Globe sports page Sunday, some explanations are beyond belief. And about the Celtics, the implosion of the Celtics is depressing. The blame pie is large. Totally agree. But at this hour, it's hard to come up with a figure more loathed in Boston sports history than Kyrie Irving. Where I guess that strikes me as maybe a little overstated, but maybe not too much. And again, Kyrie and I, fellow Dukies. Of course, I lasted on campus about 3 years longer than Kyrie did. I didn't happen to play basketball at Duke, obviously, but fellow Dukie. But I'm just really down on Kyrie. More of Shaughnessy. He lied to us when he said he was coming back. He blew up the team chemistry. He was a nut. And he choked in the playoffs after telling us all year that he would take care of business then. Now Anthony Davis is a Laker, and Al Horford is headed out the door, and the Celtics are in full rebuild. We get to watch the kids develop. Swell. 1 year after taking us to the threshold of the finals, the Celtics are in the dreaded upper middle class of the NBA. They're losing 40% of their starting lineup. Love to hear from some Celtics people out there. Again, our usual number, 528-5315. So I was pretty down. I was pretty extremely disappointed with, again, the Celtics playoffs after, disposing pretty easily of the Indiana Pacers and playing a great first game against the Milwaukee Bucks. After that, Celtics just faded away. Really a disastrous season. But now that the reality is setting in again, things aren't quite final now, but Kyrie's gone, I guess. Top suitors appear to be maybe the Brooklyn Nets, whatever. I don't wish him badly, but I just want him gone. So the Celtics, drafted 4 guys. They have 4 guys coming in the draft. Decent players. Again, they didn't have Their top pick was a 14th pick, Romeo Langford, out of Indiana, who sounds like a great kid. In fact, all 4 players who the Celtics drafted, they all sound like good kids. And with the Kyrie situation, Danny Ainge, head of basketball operations, is making it crystal clear that character, team chemistry guys are what he's after, and that's totally understandable. I guess you can go back and forth on team chemistry. Sometimes I think it's overstated that it's a bigger thing than it really needs to be, but I'll pretty much take good chemistry when I can get it. But this Celtics team was just horribly dysfunctional. It sounds like Kyrie got on the case of Jason Tatum, of course, a fellow Dookie for Kyrie, and Jaylen Brown. It just sounds like things went south. And probably the biggest blow, and what kind of blows my mind, is that the Celtics hierarchy seemingly, I'd love to hear Danny Ainge after Kyrie's officially gone to Brooklyn or wherever, and I'd love to sit Danny Ainge down and get some straight comments. Danny, be serious. You really wanted Kyrie back after last year's disaster? Paying him mega bucks, $1 gazillion, and you're telling me you wanted him back? Because the line and everything I've read is that it was one of the blows for the Celtics was Kyrie leaving. Yeah, I sure don't think it's a blow. I think that's the best thing that's happened to these guys. Al Horford, another story, and Nighthawk and I. Nighthawks is your big Celtic guy. I'm sorry he's not with us because he's our top Celtics guy. But we talked about Al Horford, a top-of-the-line guy, great guy who's been a very good player for the Celtics. 1 year left in his contract, and as Nighthawk thought, I think a lot of people thought, he would decline that last year in hopes of getting a longer-term contract. And I think Nighthawk thought the Celtics had a very good chance of keeping him. I guess maybe it was a year. I think the Celtics maybe offered Horford, 3 years at whatever. And I think Al was looking for 4 years, and apparently the 3-year money that the Celtics were prepared to give him was way less than he thought. So that hurt. I mean, I think that was the biggest surprise of what's going on with the Celtics, was that Al Horford will be hitting the road. So again, but I'm trying to get over my dismay at this last horrible season. And I think for Celtics fans, hey, Toronto, the Raptors giving Canada its first championship and since the Blue Jays won the World Series maybe in '93. So kudos for Toronto, a great city, Canada, getting their first championship for one of the top pro teams. And we'll see if Mr. Leonard stays around. That's a huge issue for the Raptors if Kawhi Leonard stays around or if he goes elsewhere. But Toronto, this is a very, very good team. So again, for the folks, I wasn't quite there, but for the folks who just have the Celtics, of course they're going to get back to or get to the championship. I try never to assume anything. I certainly didn't assume that. But I think some of the opposition that the Celtics had was better than people thought. Obviously, Toronto was better than people thought. So anyway, so the Celtics drafted 4 guys and decent draft picks. We'll see what happens. They all had their day in Boston recently, and I think we're talking some decent players here, but I'm just not sure. As I guess Shaughnessy said, the Celtics are looking like a upper middle class team or something. I just think at this point, I'd like to think they'll be a competitive team. The one thing with Kyrie presumably leaving and Horford leaving is the Celtics have a lot of money to play with. Cap space money? I think Danny Ainge may have something like about $35 million to play with. One name I'm hearing is Kemba Walker. Maybe Kemba, the former UConn star, might have some interest in Boston. So they definitely have some money to play with. But, I'm trying to look on the bright side here, something that I often probably don't do, being typically a glass half empty kind of guy. But again, I'd love to get back to where we were 2 years ago when Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, they still have a pretty good nucleus of some young talent. If some of the draft picks, and Grant Williams, a forward out of Tennessee, this guy can play. I think the Celtics draft picks are getting decent word, and they got the guard from Purdue who almost single-handedly beat Virginia. Virginia Cavaliers, of course, going on to win the National Basketball Championship. Now, the Purdue guard, all he did against Virginia was score 42 points. So I think the Celtics draft picks are getting decent words. And so, again, 4 draft picks and hopefully, again, the top guy, Romeo Langford, main beef on him is good kid, goes to the basket well, but can't shoot. A slight problem in the NBA. He had a hand injury last year that he played through. I guess a gutty kid. He played all season, although Indiana did not have a good season. I think they lost 12 straight games, at least in the Big Ten. But it sounds like a gutty kid. I'm not even sure he told people about his hand injury. But he just said, 27% of three-pointers? That's not real impressive. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But I'm trying to get psyched a little bit. Again, it'll be a young team, and we're kind of back to where we were a couple of years ago, hopefully, with kind of an up-and-coming team. But again, this last season was just such a disaster. So I'm trying to think a little more optimistically about the Celtics. I think it'll be a fun year next year with a decent team, with young kids again young players doing their thing. Again, Marcus Smart, nobody plays harder than this guy. So, I think the future is still reasonably bright for the Celtics, but obviously they seem to be on a path towards another championship or two. That certainly isn't happening, or certainly has been delayed for a while. But anyway, I'm trying to be upbeat on the Celtics. And caller Bobby a couple of weeks ago, I think, made a great point. This was, I think he called on the night of Game 7 or right before Game 7 of the Bruins and St. Louis Blues. And I really got into the Bruins this year. I love the team. I probably got into the Bruins more than any year since I was maybe growing up. Well, when I was growing up in the Boston area, pretty bad team. Seems like I can remember someone on the upper balcony up on the gallery gods of the old Boston Garden for the first, for maybe 10 years of my young life, somebody bellowing out after the first game, "Wait till next year," after the Bruins get killed in their home opener. Horrible team. The one player I'm remembering from those years, Teddy Green, the tough defenseman, a very good defenseman. But anyway, bad team. But then Bobby Orr and some other pretty good players showed up, and the big bad Bruins folks really got into. Anyway, I really got into the Bruins this year. It's a great mix of young players, Charlie McAvoy to name one, and veterans, Zdeno Chara still. In fact, they were a team on defense. I love it. Chara, 42 years old, McAvoy half his age, 21. Anyway, but a great year for the Bruins. They seemed to get a break postseason, didn't have to deal with Tampa Bay Lightning. But anyway, they went, of course, to Game 7 against the St. Louis Blues, and just a stinker of a game, a painful game. Although kind of ironically, the Bruins pretty much dominated much of the first period. Of course, the game at TD Garden in Boston, Bruins pretty much dominating the first period, but couldn't put the puck in the net. St. Louis gets one goal, and then the killer goal was a goal with about 8 seconds left on kind of a breakaway, 2-0 after one period, and it was over. But kudos to St. Louis. Again, I was going to mention caller Bobby a few weeks ago before Game 7 said, hey, win or lose, congratulate the Bruins on a great season, and I think that's a good way to look at it. As painful as that game was, and it was still pretty painful, now that the Bruins got to seventh game of the final Stanley Cup Series. Pretty good effort, even though they got maybe some breaks along the way. I guess the biggest Bruin issue for me right now is Torrey Krug. Krug, their fine, young, gritty defenseman, and he showed a lot. I mean, his stock was already pretty high. It certainly went up quite a bit higher with a great Stanley Cup Series between, of course, the hit, one of the games here, the great hit he put on someone who had been torturing him down ice, but offensively a good player. And Torrey Krug is, 5'9" maybe? In the world of big-time hockey today, it's pretty big players. In fact, the NHL draft, Nighthawk can tell you all about the Montreal draft. I can tell you nothing about them. But the Bruins got a guy looks like he might be a player down the road. I think he's going to end up at Michigan this year, but a forward, I think he's 6'3", 210, 215, pretty big kid. Torrey Krug is not a big kid. This kid is one of the grittiest players in hockey. Anyway, the story with him, I think he's on his last year of about a $5.5 million contract. After that, he's going to be making pretty good buckos. I'm reading that probably after that he might be good for, who knows, 3 or 4 year contract for maybe $9-10 million a year, something like that. And boy, whether the Bruins whether they want to sign, I'm sure they'd love to sign him. They'd love to keep him on the team. But boy, I'm just not sure that money's going to be around. This is a story out of the Boston Herald just a couple of days ago. Tough call on Krug. And this is Steve Conroy. And I'll read some of this. And again, folks, love to have you check in at 528-5315, all by myself tonight. Again, signing him now pricey for bees. The Bruins left the Pacific Northwest on Saturday with a handful of teenagers to feed into the pipeline, nothing more or less. Now it's on to the heavy lifting for GM Don Sweeney. And kudos to Sweeney, who just got GM of the Year award. I'm not sure there were maybe a few other GMs more deserving, maybe the St. Louis Blues. And again, back to the last game of the Stanley Cup, kudos to the St. Louis Blues. I thought at times as I watched pretty close or listened to pretty close to every minute of the final series, I certainly thought at times the Blues were the better team, certainly the more physical team. But what a story. I mean, kudos to the good folks in St. Louis. One of certainly some of the greatest baseball fans in the country. But again, the Blues' first championship, but a team that was in dead last place in early January, and they come back to win the Stanley Cup. If that's not one of the great sports stories of 2019, I don't know what is. And their coach, Craig Berube, he was the interim coach, some interim coach. They just re-upped him for another 3 years, and I trust he got a pretty good raise. Anyway, back to the story on Krug. Sweeney's most important business of the summer and fall, perhaps, is to get restricted free agents Charlie McAvoy, Brandon Carlo, and Danton Heinen under contract. But there's an even bigger cloud hanging over the Bruins and what their future holds. It's the contract status of the aforementioned Torrey Krug. Krug has 1 more year left in his deal that'll pay him $5.25 million. I was close. And then he'll be an unrestricted free agent. He'll be making a lot more than that, a little more than a year from now. In a highly unscientific poll, we asked a handful of hockey people here. This is Vancouver, where the draft was. He's writing from. Asked hockey people here, all things being equal, who would you rather have, Torrey Krug or P.K. Subban? Of course, P.K. Subban just got traded the other day to the New Jersey Devils, the former Montreal Canadiens. 4 went with Krug, and a 5th, after some hemming and hawing, went with Subban. Boy, I'd say that speaks pretty highly of Krug. I'm very high on P.K. Subban. Subban, traded again Saturday from Nashville to New Jersey, essentially for cap space, makes $9 million a year. Subban has averaged .632 points per game over his career, while Krug is just a tick below at .623. Again, getting a point about 2 out of every 3 games. Krug and his representation would be well within their rights to start their negotiations at $9 million. Sweeney has done a good job in getting Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak to take team-friendly deals. But thus far in his career, Krug's natural competitiveness has extended to the negotiating table. Good for him. Getting every penny he's worth is a player's prerogative, including the undrafted Krug. Wow, undrafted player. Now, there may be some recency bias in the upsurge of Krug's stock, what with Krug's excellent playoff run fresh in people's minds. But 2 full months of the most intense hockey you can find is not a small sample size. In that time, Krug demonstrated that he can be who he always said he could be, a legitimate top 4 defenseman with extraordinary offensive and power play skills. To these eyes, he displayed some defensive capabilities that he hadn't prior to the 2019 Cup run, and did it for a long enough period of time to suggest it was no fluke. Beyond being a terrific player, Krug is everything the Bruins want in terms of leadership, competitiveness, and gumption. But with all the draft capital they spent over the past 4 years in left-handed defensemen in Urho, boy, tough name, Vakanainen, Jeremy Lauzon, and Jacob Zaboral. None of these guys mean anything to me. With what they'll have to invest on the right side with McAvoy and Carlo, and Brandon Carlo. Again, McAvoy, these are 2 great young players. You got to keep these guys. And with a gaping hole in the top 6, right wing, can they afford to keep Krug? It would seem logical that a trade might be prudent. Hate to read that, but that might be the case. On the other hand, to move Krug now would take a major leap of faith. As the guy just mentioned, Vakanainen, ready to take over the first power play unit with just 32 North American games under his belt? Or would Lauzon be the guy to come up from Providence and McAvoy take over the power play from the right side? There's no evidence that either would be as proficient as Krug. It would help the Bees' cause if they could unload the last 2 years of the David Backes contract. Backes, of course, was a longtime Blues captain. It felt a little bad. He sat out a number of games in the Stanley Cup. He sounds like a top estimable guy, but didn't have a very good season. Both Sweeney and Coach Bruce Cassidy, and kudos to Bruce Butch Cassidy for doing a fine job. This guy's done a great job since taking over as coach. They both said they envisioned Backes remaining with the Bees and competing for the fourth line spot. And I love the Bruins. Their third and fourth lines at times were better than their first and certainly second lines. But even with Backes' estimable leadership, and don't underestimate what Backes contributed to rebuilding this team into a Stanley Cup contender, that's not quite enough for $6 million a year for the next 2 years. But we found out on Saturday at the draft just how painful ridding themselves of that contract would be. The Maple Leafs had to include a first-round draft pick in 2020, albeit a top 10 protected one, to Carolina, so that they would take the last year of Patrick Marleau's deal that has an average annual value of $6 million. The Bees would be looking for someone to take 2 years of the Backes deal. Good luck with that. We all know that last couple of years of the deal would be troublesome with Backes' age and the hard miles he's driven. But now that those years are here, they could be extra painful. For what it's worth, the Bees did not ask Carolina, a floor team, if they were interested in taking Backes' contract, according to a source. If it was up to this observer, Krug's performance in the playoffs against some very heavy teams is enough for me to sign him, one way or another. But that's easier said than done. Giving up first-round picks and prospects just to free up cap space is a bitter pill GMs, understandably, would not like to swallow. Figuring out how much his restricted free agents will cost should help Sweeney navigate this issue. But this has to be the most difficult decision facing Sweeney since his first month on the job, when he began this rebuild-on-the-fly trading Dougie Hamilton and Milan Lucic. Come to think of it, in hindsight, those decisions look easy compared to the Krug dilemma. So it's a pretty serious Bees guy. That's a huge issue to me hanging over the Bruins. I would hate to see Torrey Krug hit the road, but again, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. And here's another, while we're on hockey, another hockey note. Another headline out of the Boston Herald: League expands video review. Of course, there were some calls in the Stanley Cup playoffs, or non-calls, maybe I should say, that got a ton of attention. Again, another story, recent story out of Vancouver where the draft was. And this is Boston Herald Wire Services. The NHL is expanding its video review process to allow an unlimited number of coaching challenges to address concerns raised after several notable missed calls during the playoffs. The new freedoms, however, come at a price. On Thursday, the league's general managers approved lifting limits on the number of times a coach can challenge a play during the game for goalie interference, offside, and added the element of possible missed calls that would have resulted in a stoppage of play before a goal was scored. Got a call? And hey, wonder, I've got a call. I can't tell you how happy I am. Thank you, caller. Thanks for checking in. What's up?
How are we doing tonight, Duke? Are you all alone?
I am all alone. In fact, I just mentioned you there, Bobby. Yeah, tried to get, of course, the Nighthawks not available. And boy, probably tried about a half dozen folks, and summertime and the living's easy. So I came up shorthanded. So certainly apologizing to the good folks out there, but yep, just me. So thank you for calling. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Enjoying the nice weather finally.
In fact, guess what I
did. It's been vintage Vermont, and it's been very enjoyable after a rather long and soggy spring.
Tough spring. In fact, I can tell you, guess what I did today? I got out in one of the kayaks, courtesy of you and Nighthawk, and went out to Burden Island, had a good lunch at the Burden Island Bistro. So, yeah, summer maybe hit home for me for maybe the first day today. It was nice to get out on the lake. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, awesome. Glad you enjoyed yourself. Couple of things, and you might have went over it already today or maybe last week. It's with the Tampa Bay Rays, there was rumors, and maybe it's just that perhaps, in 2021, they may play half of their games in Montreal, which, geez, I would certainly love to see that. I've read kind of pros and cons, and maybe it's going to happen and maybe it isn't going to happen. I really don't know what's going on with it, but I think it would be very well supported up there, and it would be so good too for around here, the minor leagues, the little leagues, and everything. Years and years ago, when we had the Expos here and stuff, they'd get buses to go up, and a lot of the T-ball kids and coaches pitch. At the end of the season, they'd take a bus up to Montreal and get to see the big league games. Well, since the Expos left, Boston's quite a poke, and you're not going to see as many busloads of kids really going to there. I remember 100 years ago when I was in Little League, we completed our season and we went to Boston, and we had this old school bus. We loaded all the Little League up in there, a long, hot, bumpy ride. But, I remember that game well there. Ken Harrelson hit a home run. Really? I do believe they were playing the White Sox.
Wow.
But, it was, way back when. And, I remember walking into Fenway for the first time up the ramp.
Wow.
And walking in and looking out. And the first thing that kind of grabbed me was the Green Monster. How big that wall was. I mean, it kind of magnetically pulled me right to it. I was just stopped. I was in awe. And, that was quite an experience up there. And, I would kind of hoping that, baseball would come back this way. And I feel this time around Montreal would be a little more supportive than it was last time. And, like we said before, if, we could somehow throw them into, or they would be in our division actually, because Tampa Bay is, that would draw tons of Red Sox, Yankees, Blue Jays fans out there. And I have no way of proving it, but I just really feel they would be very welcome and supported this time around. And, I would go up there plenty of times, weekend games at, what is it, hour and a half up there, probably hour and a half?
Yeah, 70 miles maybe, easy trip.
So, that the good thing is you can make a day event out of it, too, where we've done it a couple times in Boston, my son and I.
Boy, that's tough.
Drive down there, taking the game and come home. But that's as I get older, that's quite a trip.
Yeah, I agree. Bobby, I did get into this early on, but no, I'm happy to tell. That's why I'm wearing my hat, in fact. But boy, this proposal, it just sounds like kind of half-baked. I mean, it's very sketchy. They're talking about, for one thing, I'm hearing that for this proposal to move ahead, there have to be new stadiums in both Tampa and Montreal. So if you're going to have your team playing just half the home games and stuff, that sounds crazy. It just sounds very half-baked. I happened to hear Buster Olney today, the great baseball guy who's Randolph Center, Vermont native son. He was asked on the 101.3, the folks Nick works with, a very good, radio show earlier in the day. Buster, they asked him about that, and he said, this is a mirage. And he also mentioned the Players Union. How do you think the Players Union is going to react to something like this? And apparently the mayor of St. Petersburg has either not said anything or has said this sounds insane. So this particular proposal, I mean, I totally agree. If we could just get rid of Tampa, if we just could convince Major League Baseball, hey, MLB, Tampa Bay hasn't worked. What's their average attendance? Under 10,000, I think. get them out of Tampa, move them to Montreal, as you say, get them in the AL East, and I think you have an absolute winning card. But this just sounds half-baked to me, especially if they're making both cities build new stadiums. So this particular proposal, and I'm not, I haven't heard a lot of details of it, but, it kind of sounds good at quick glance, but the deeper you look, I think it sounds pretty dubious. But again, if you could get rid of Tampa Bay and just move the franchise to Montreal, I think you'd have a winner. But that's not what they're talking about right now. So I don't know.
I don't know if Tampa Bay haven't they have at least the next few years still there.
That's another good point. The lease is till 2027. In fact, that's another great point. So they're not going in. They're seemingly not going anywhere.
That kind of tells me there won't be a new stadium up there,
Right.
and that place is a little bit
Horrible.
less than
Might be
beautiful
worse.
up there.
Might be worse
And
than the Big O.
I just don't. I don't know. I have different thoughts. I don't know if this is kind of putting Tampa Bay owners or the city, like, you guys, you've had plenty of time to do something here. You've done nothing. You guys better get things going or else.
Yeah.
Because to really come public with it, there's got to be a little smoke in that fire someplace.
Could be. You might be right. It might be seen as like the first step to getting them out of there. But you're right. The lease thing goes till 2027. Who knows? And the new stadium in both places. Maybe it's the first step in getting Tampa out of there and to Montreal. Hey, I'd love it.
That's kind of what my thought is. And I would think even splitting time. I mean, the players are on the road all the time anyways. And, during the summertime, I would almost think it'd be a treat for them playing in Montreal. It's
good point.
Beautiful city, and I'm sure most of them have never been there before. And, it's probably a little bit cooler than St. Pete. And, I mean, they go to London to play baseball, to play football, and, what the heck? It's not that far-fetched, I don't think.
Could be. Again, I don't have a lot of details on this, so it seems pretty sketchy. But if it would be like the first step to getting baseball back to Montreal, obviously, ideally, on a full-time, all-the-time basis in the AL East. Who knows? It'll be interesting to see. I did hear Steve Bronfman. I guess maybe he's Charles's kid. Charles Bronfman being one of the key guys with the old Expos. But I heard Steve Bronfman was interviewed by Aaron Rand on CJD out of Montreal just a little over an hour ago, and he was sounding pretty optimistic, saying, new stadium would take at least 3 years to build it. Not that I see a ton of movement on that, but he said, hey, any forward progress is better than nothing. He did acknowledge, I'm not really up to speed with their Tampa Bay's legal constraints, but he was sounding pretty optimistic without getting into a lot of details. He made the point that Montreal is booming, which I think, I know. Boy, the biggest problem with Montreal, it happened right after the Steve Bronfman interview on CJD. I heard CJD's every 15-minute traffic report. I'm telling you, I just kind of neglect Montreal these days, and traffic's one of the issues. They just built the new Champlain Bridge. That just opened to traffic. But the whole city seems like it's under construction. Just sounds like driving in that city is a nightmare at this point. Hopefully that'll ease in the future. But anyway, he sounded like he was open to the idea if there could actually be some movement towards the new stadium. But it's a great story. I guess if you're someone who wants baseball back in Montreal, any news like that would, I guess it's easy to take it as potentially some good news. We'll see.
I mean, I love Major League games, but geez, Boston, number one, it's pretty hard to get tickets. Probably not so much now. The parking is terrible there. It's just an old stadium built in the middle of the city, and that's how things were done back then. I'm sure in Montreal, by some chance, some miracle, if this went through, a new stadium would definitely be built on the outskirts, like they do all new stadiums today.
Although the talk actually in Montreal, I think Major League Baseball has made it pretty clear they'd want a stadium downtown, in fact. So when I hear talk of a new stadium in Montreal, I'm usually hearing downtown. There at least was some land right near the Bell Center. I don't know if that's still available, but you're right. Most cities do tend to build, like Atlanta, their new stadium on the outskirts. But all the talk I hear about Montreal is if they were going to do a stadium, it'd be downtown. But hey, who knows? Who knows? And you're right about Boston.
Now, what do they do with the Big O now? Is that still operable for anything?
No, it's still operable because they have a couple of exhibition games here every spring. Toronto plays their last 2 exhibition games here right before their season, so they still play 2 baseball games here a year. I think maybe the Alouettes play there some. It's still operable, but they still play baseball games there. So who knows if this half the season in Montreal comes true. If they're actually moving on a new stadium, I suspect you might see a year or 2 of the Big O back in action. But sure, they still play 2 games there a year, so yeah, it's definitely still operable.
Perhaps what they should do, and again, it's just me thinking out loud again, is schedule Toronto Red Sox series there. The Yankees and Red Sox are in London this weekend, correct?
Yeah, correct. Saturday and Sunday, 2 games.
So I don't think it would be that far-fetched to give Montreal a little taste of baseball again. And I think that would be a pretty good series up there and a pretty good draw.
Yeah, well, again, they had their 2 exhibition games right at the end of the exhibition season, and they pretty much fill it up. The crowds, again, it's just 2 games, but the crowds have been great for those games. So, yeah, no, it's an interesting story for sure. And your point about Boston, Bob, the expense. Good luck if you can somehow get tickets. Yeah, good luck taking your wife and couple kids to a Red Sox game. Yeah, that's going to set you back. Maybe spend the night. We're talking hundreds of dollars. Easy to spend like a grand. The expenses is insane at this point. So, it's a tough.
Yeah, it's certainly not family friendly.
No, anything but family friendly. That's why I often mention the golf tourney I go to on my April trip to South Carolina, the golf tourney that follows the Masters. I throw out that probably every time I come back from that for the 4-day tournament. This is a legit tourney. It's been on the PGA Tour, one of the oldest tournaments, a Heritage in Hilton Head. Beautiful course, beautiful place. My 4-day ticket, for that matter, I could get 3 practice rounds if I wanted, but that grounds ticket for the whole tournament is about $150. That strikes me as that's a pretty fair price. I can be watching, good golf from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. for 4 days and throw in practice rounds. Good luck. I'd be lucky if that's what I spent, spending maybe 3 hours at one Red Sox game. So, yeah, I try to be a good deal guy, and golf to me,
for sure.
That's a good deal. And unfortunately, Red Sox, as fun as it is to be in Fenway, I grew up about 15 miles from the ballpark. I caught Game 1 of the 1967 World Series there. I've had some great times in Fenway, but boy, as you say, it's anything but a family. From this tells you how ancient I am. I'm sure I mentioned this before. Guess what I can remember? When I was a pretty young kid paying for a bleacher seat in Fenway. You ready for this? You might guess $1 or so. How about a quarter? Again, that shows you how ancient I am, but I can literally remember paying a quarter for a bleacher seat in Fenway Park. I'm probably going back to the late 1950s when again, I was there for Ted Williams' last game with only no more than half the ballpark filled. That ticket probably couldn't have cost me more than $1 or $2. Anyway, so it's a different ball game.
Red Sox chatter, any moves before or after the All-Star break, or
it's funny.
Pretty quiet on the front?
Yeah, I know the Red Sox have lost you, and I can understand your concern about that. But to be honest, I'm not really hooked in. I'm paying a little more attention now. Boy, relief pitching. I guess there's 7 games they've lost after the 7th inning. Definitely hear talk about maybe trying to find a closer, but not hearing a ton of talk. And what talk I'm hearing is that of getting a relief pitcher. Matt Barnes has been getting beaten up. They've had some injuries. but not a ton of talk. But any talk, probably a relief pitcher is probably at the top of the talk. But we'll see. But boy, the Red Sox, they lost today.
So
the Yankees
teams,
won again,
which is good. The last couple of years, where so many teams are still in the hunt that you don't have a lot of dumping going on with these teams, which is good for baseball.
Yeah.
I think some people like the wild card and some people don't.
Yeah.
But it keeps these teams a little more honest.
Yeah.
And like I said, in years past, there used to be, a lot of teams dumping, but, when you're still mathematically in it, you're going to hang on to your teammates.
Yeah. Here, probably the biggest Red Sox story just today. I've got the Boston Globe in front of me, and a headline on the sports page, front page of the sports page: uncomfortable feeling. Wright returns under cloud of suspension. So, and again, this is a guy who's got a pretty recent checkered past, Mr. Stephen Wright. Of course, he's had injuries, but just coming back after, the 80-game suspension for performance-enhancing drugs, that after missing or being suspended for 15 games on the domestic abuse violence issue. So definitely kind of I guess he was welcomed back by his teammates, but again, it's a bit tough situation. I mean, this guy's had a pretty shaky last year or two, but he's back in the team and they need him. Of course, that means he also can't play postseason if, in fact, the Red Sox make it to postseason, but he'll be useful. They can definitely use another body in the bullpen, but I think we talked about him before.
Yeah, he was a good inning eater.
Yeah, good inning eater. Did better in relief than I would have thought. Yeah, his stats were pretty good, but I think there was some talk on this set. Hey, should they just get rid of this guy? I mean, that's a couple of pretty serious issues, but at this point, I guess they're happy to have another body, but he does come in under, a cloud of suspension, as the headline noted. Anyway, what about you looking?
Who would have known this would have happened? It all started with that being a pinch runner.
Right. Who could forget that? In San Diego, right, they have him pinch run at second base, and he screws up his leg, although I'm not sure that had anything to do with the domestic abuse thing. But yeah, that certainly got his injury started, and I'm not sure. Supposedly, I heard today that it's basically the same knee injury that Pedroia has. Obviously, I guess not as severe. But, I hadn't heard that reference before, but somebody said it was a similar injury to Pedroia. And boy, if you're thinking we're going to see Dustin Pedroia again, one would be a lot more optimistic than me. I got to think Pedroia never plays baseball again, although I guess we'll see.
Now, you know what? He's a very brave man for trying as hard as he has
he did
rehabbing, but...
Yeah.
He was certainly an icon of a good old-fashioned baseball player, but he's got to keep in mind he's got another, 50 years to walk on that leg outside of baseball. So, he probably, easy for me to say, but count his blessings in that he's had such a great career and such a loved person. But, it's time to think about himself and his family and, use that leg for other things.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. Unfortunately for Dustin and his family, I think we can probably safely say money shouldn't be an issue for them. But nope, I hear you. He's got a ton of years left on the planet. So, I guess instead of rehabbing, I guess he's just kind of been hanging out, having a good time with his family as he ponders his future. But boy, a little hard to believe that playing baseball is going to be part of that future. Bobby, I did give you kudos before you checked in, and I'll just repeat it now. I think you called. I think it was Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, last game. I think it was maybe a Wednesday night, and your comment was, hey, win or lose, the Bruins have had a very good season, so, be sure to, if they happen to lose a game, which of course they did, and it was kind of a stinker of a game, but I thought you made a good point. That last game really hurt But for Bruins fans to say, geez, Bruins, you choked on the big game. Hey, they had a heck of a season. They got some scheduling breaks, I think, in the Stanley Cup. But hey, to get to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals was a pretty good season. I love the team, a good mix of young and older players. I spent a lot of time on Torrey Krug. I love Torrey Krug, and I'm kind of freaked because he's on the last year of about a $5.25 million contract, but he had a great Stanley Cup. So the thinking is his next contract will be more like $9 to $10 million a year, and just not at all clear whether the Bruins, they love him, but whether they'll, pay that kind of money. So there's some talk that they might try to trade him, and I love Torrey Krug, so that's the Bruin issue that's kind of freaking me out. But kudos to you for your comment. The Bruins had a great year. One more good game would have been nice, but it was a heck of a year, so I love your comment.
Oh, yeah. They're just fun to sit back and watch. I watch more Bruins this year than ever, and I love the pace of the game.
Yeah.
It's ironic because years past they were always the big, slow, tough guys,
Yeah.
They'd murder you in the boards and, they'd grind games out. Well, over the last few years, they've kind of gotten a little smaller and faster. They're almost like a European hockey team now, skate fast, pass, score, and they became very exciting. And again, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year we're going to make it to the Stanley Cups, I would have said fantastic.
Sure.
And again, you've just got to just enjoy everything. You can't be bummed out if they don't win the World Series, if they don't win the Stanley Cup, if you don't win the Super Bowl. Just enjoy the game.
Yeah. And for my Dukies, again, a lot of people, understandably, with Zion Williamson, had the Dukies. Gee, they ought to be able to win a national championship. Williamson, R.J. Barrett, all their, Cam Reddish and stuff, and they didn't. In fact, for the record, they should have lost their second-round game to old friend Johnny Dawkins and UCF, University of Central Florida. But that said, again, they didn't make it. They didn't make it to the end in basketball. But you're going to tell me I didn't enjoy the season? Are you kidding me? Zion was one of the most fun guys I've seen ever, and one of the most fun guys maybe anybody's seen ever. So hey, take what you can get. So yeah, that's a very, very good point.
Oh, without a doubt. I got a good. Of course, he missed a few games.
Yeah.
Probably 2/3 of the way through the season.
Yeah.
And he came back towards the end, and I'm sure they were just getting him back in baseball shape for the tournament. But I had a good look at him when they played the Tar Heels. And this guy has got I mentioned last week on the show, the strongest hands of any basketball player I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He goes up for the rebound against 2 or 3 other people, and there's hands all over that ball. And every time he comes out strong with that ball, he's just kind of a freak of nature, for basketball. This guy is amazing.
Yeah. And also what's worth noting is, which we've talked about before, he seems like a real good, pretty grounded kid. He seems like a real good kid. He didn't. A lot of those high school players will go on to some of your top private high schools and stuff. I don't think he did that. He's out of I think Spartanburg, South Carolina. So, he sounded like he still stayed pretty grounded. His high school coach just said, hey, he's a grounded kid. He's a good kid. He just comes across as a very good kid. We were talking about how he didn't seem to be very happy that he got drafted by New Orleans, but it sounds like he's come to terms. I think they got a pretty good team. They've got some very good talent. I think they might at least be a playoff team.
Yeah, that's what they mentioned last week on our show. I thought the same. I kind of mentioned, geez, how's he going to feel, getting beat up pretty bad there all the time, and the guys on the panel last week, mentioned who they got for the draft, and I wasn't aware of that. I don't know a whole lot about pro basketball, but they seem to have surrounded him with some pretty good players. So that team certainly has a team leader now.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good situation. I think, and New Orleans is a great city. Sure, it's a small market, but hey, worst case scenario, if he doesn't like it there, those rookie contracts I think are 4-year contracts. So, at the ripe old age of like 22 or 23, he can do whatever he wants. But it sounds like New Orleans sounds like a good young team. I think sounds like a good spot for him. So anyway.
Yeah, the more I thought about it after, it's probably a lot better spot. You don't have the New York pressure or Boston pressure on you, which, I would have loved to see them on the Celtics. But, if you watch any of the talk shows after every Celtic game, Red Sox game, if you don't score 100 points, they kind of rip you apart. And, there's a lot of bad press. So, after giving it second thoughts, I felt that was a good landing spot for him to start his career.
Yeah. No, I think it should be a fun season. What about Toronto? Kudos to I got into the Celtics thing. I spent some time on that, and geez, Kyrie, I just want Kyrie to be gone. It obviously didn't work out in Boston, and again, so I was, the Celtics, again, we talked about that. I think a lot of folks thought the Celtics, of course, are going to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe NBA Finals and stuff, and things just totally fell apart. But I think I'm trying to move on. I want Kyrie gone. It wasn't a good fit. Kyrie has just kind of lost me. But again, the Celtics still have some very good young talent. I think the draft was pretty good. They got 4 guys, all of whom, might be NBA players. So I'm trying to look to get past the Kyrie thing and try to look a little more optimistically. It'll be like going back a couple of years for the Celtics with young talent, and you hope they'll get better and stuff. Certainly no thoughts of a championship for a few years anyway, but I'm trying to feel better about the Celtics. But Kyrie lost me. He just totally lost me.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine, and I think there was a lot of pressure, and the expectations were very, very, very high, and anything short of winning everything, people would have been upset. And they didn't. They did not have a terrible year. They played, they were a bit streaky, but they played some good basketball. They were entertaining, and there was a lesson to be learned this year. I'm sure, they stand up, brush themselves off, and I'm ready to go at it next year. And perhaps they went in a little too confident. Who knows? But they'll be back next year. They'll have a good team.
Yeah, this is a headline in today's Boston Herald. Smart, ready to expand role, as in Marcus, will take lead with new look Celtics. So, no, I'm feeling better about the Celtics. I'll just be, the day Kyrie officially goes to Brooklyn or wherever he goes, I'll feel better. But no, I think there's a lot to look forward to for the Celtics, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Kyrie became a distraction this year. Was it his fault? Or was it not? People could argue, but he did become a major distraction, on the court, on the radios, in the newspapers. So with him gone, I think it'll be better for him to move on, and probably better for the Celtics to move on.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway.
They'll start fresh next year.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll let you go, Richard. Nice talking to you as always, and let's keep our fingers crossed for Tampa Bay to come up north here and play a little baseball.
Hey, that'd be Bobby. Thanks for making my night. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate the call. We'll see ya.
Okay, good night, buddy.
See ya. Bye-bye. Okay, hey, really appreciate the call. Love some more calls, folks. Again, 528-5315 is our number. Without calls, I probably would have bagged this show in another minute or two, but I guess I'll hang in. I guess we'll keep rolling at least for a while, but I'd love some more calls. I'm not sure I've got another half hour in me, but I probably have a little more time. But again, love the calls. I certainly want to mention I've got my Expos hat on. Vermont Lake Monsters. I think I'm going to get down to my first Lake Monsters game tomorrow night. Their homestand continues through the weekend if you're interested. Connecticut's in town tonight and tomorrow night. Then Staten Island comes to town after that for games Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And again, the same regular start times. Of course, last night was the first hot dog heaven night. Didn't catch that. Didn't need to eat a bunch of hot dogs anyway. But again, 7:05 starts during the week, including Friday night, Saturday night 6:05 start, and Sunday 5:05 start. And I'm just checking the promotions here for the next few games. Tomorrow night's game. In fact, I plan to go to tomorrow night's game. No, not the most exciting promotion. Princess and Comic Book Hero Night, presented by Chittenden Solid Waste District. Come dressed as your favorite princess or comic book hero, and be sure to get there early, 6:20 p.m. for the pre-game parade. Well, sure, that'll be fun for some folks. Doesn't do anything for me. Friday night. Now, this might be a little more like it promotion-wise. Football night at the ballpark. Lake Monsters football jersey giveaway to the first 1,000 fans. That sounds like a pretty legit giveaway. That's Friday night, so you might want to consider that. I might want to consider that. Again, that's Friday night. Saturday night, Maple Kings night at the ballpark. First 500 fans will receive a sweet Maple Kings jersey, courtesy of People's United Bank. That's Saturday night. And then Sunday, Lake Monsters bike helmet giveaway to the first 400 kids, courtesy of the UVM Children's Hospital. So those are some pretty decent promos. That ends their homestand. They're on the road for July 4th, games before and after July 4th. And they're back at Centennial Field on Sunday, July 7 for 3 games and on the road again. But anyway, but there's still 2 hot dog heaven night, 25-cent hot dog nights to go. They've also got some Saturday night fireworks. The next one of those is July 13th, again on July 27, the last one on August 24. So anyway, the Lake Monsters are back in town. Geez, I guess we'll keep rolling. Boy, folks, I'd love another call. I'll dig up a few more things to talk about here, but love another call or two at, again, 528-5315. I guess I'll turn things locally today and bore you with my day. I took a break today, didn't have to work. Probably should have cut my lawn, but decided not to do that. But as I mentioned to caller Bobby, I got out on my kayak today. Talk about just an area, lucky us. There's a lot of good stuff to do around here. Got in some kayaking today. Had my first swim at Camp Kilcare State Park, which is my main summer swimming place. I will admit the water going in felt a little cool, but I hung in for about 15, 20 minutes. Body got used to it pretty quickly. Boy, I don't have a free press in front of me. The official lake temp has, and I should note, I was talking about Lake Monsters. I do have my Lake Monsters tie-dye shirt on. Anyway, boy, the official water temp, it might be 50s. It definitely, I grew up in salt water on the Massachusetts coast. I have a pretty good feel for water temps. Kilcare struck me today in relatively shallow water. God, I got to think it must have been 65 or so, certainly low to mid 60s anyway. So I thought it was swimmable. But again, just with the great state parks, and again, I kayaked out to Burden Island State Park today, had a great lunch at the Burden Island Bistro. And for folks who get out to Burden Island, in the old days when I wrote a column, every summer I'd probably wrote a column about how great the state and some of our local parks are. Best summer outing to me around here is taking the ferry from Kilcare, if you don't have your own boat, to get out to Burden Island. A lot of folks go out there for their campground. You can bike out there. You can even bring your dog out there. Don't bring your dog to Kilcare, but you can bring your dog out to Burden Island. But a campground, they built some new cabins a couple of years ago. But a great nature trails out there. One of my favorite swimming places is Eagle Bay, which is kind of on the backside or far side of Burden Island State Park. Just a great place. So today was a good day. Got in some kayaking, some swimming. Then I got in a little reading at Kilcare out of the headlands as I watched, looking to the west, of course, towards the Adirondacks, storms coming in. Saw one good bolt of lightning out that way. And again, Franklin County, I think, fortunately, missed most of the storms that came in. But again, state parks, if you're into outdoor recreation, we're very lucky up here. I was at Lake Carmi State Park in Franklin just a week or two ago. Another great place. I think Lake Carmi's got, the biggest campground, of Vermont State Parks. Certainly one of the biggest. So, and I should mention also at Lake Carmel is where I usually catch 4th of July festivities. And while I think of it, again, thanks for putting up with just me tonight, folks out there. Again, no show next Wednesday. We're going to take next Wednesday night off. That's 4th of July Eve, Wednesday, July 3rd. And it just seemed like a good night. I would ordinarily have my St. Albans News show that night, my For the Record St. Albans Today show, it being the first Wednesday of the month. But sometimes we give, and we would certainly appreciate the folks, typically St. Albans Mayor Tim Smith, Brendan Deso, kudos on Brendan's recent marriage. Appreciate them and all the other folks, Bruce Cheeseman, the vice chair of the select board, and all the folks over the years who are good enough to give us some of their time on that first Wednesday of the month. But sometimes we'll take one summer Wednesday off, and next week seemed like the perfect time to take off. So again, no news show, no sports show next Wednesday. But again, the sports show will be back 2 weeks from tonight, and the Nighthawks will be back by then. You'll probably see me again as well. But again, we have a lot to be thankful for around here. And again, speaking of July 4th coming up, the great race, of course, talking about a great local sports event. Is there anything that comes close to the great race? That'll be Saturday, July 6th, of course, down at the St. Albans Bay Park, where I usually hit the Bay Park, if not Kilcare, every other night. I love to get down there for sunset. And again, the St. Albans town does a great job with the Bay Park. They keep it up in great shape. The only issue there, typically later in the summer, is water quality or the lack thereof. And again, I went by, almost stopped today, didn't quite stop, but the farmers market is down at the Bay Park on Wednesdays. Of course, farmers market, Northwest Farmers Markets at Taylor Park in St. Albans on Saturday. Again, talk about another great park. Every town or city should be so lucky to have a Taylor Park in its midst in the downtown area, with concerts having started there. But again, back to state parks. I mean, I love the state parks around here. We got, again, Lake Carmi, Camp Kilcare, Burden Island State Park, Woods Island State Park, Night Island State Park. If you have a canoe, kayak, motorboat, sailboat, all great places to go to. Then you get over to Grand Isle County. Well, I guess Night Island is Grand Isle County. You've got Alberg Dunes State Park, a sweet state park in Alberg, obviously. And it's funny, North Hero State Park, that's the place you can still get into, but the flooding, I guess, of 2011 really did it in. Have a campground there. I think it never really came back to life after that, but at least as of last summer, presumably this summer, it's still a place you can drive into. And there's a beach. You can get out on the beach as you're looking over to kind of Hog Island, West Swanton there. Still a place you can, walk around and swim. And then farther down in the islands, I mentioned Alberg Dunes State Park. You've got Grand Isle State Park with a big campground there. Knight Point State Park. So again, here in Franklin and Grand Isle counties, we are awash in really nice state parks. Just as Brady rendered the succession plan at quarterback and Jimmy G's Patriots career obsolete with his staying power and desire to keep doing his job, Belichick is doing the same to Caserio, whose contract expires after the 2020 NFL Draft. As long as Belichick is in place at Patriot Place, there's a gridiron glass ceiling for anyone else in the organization who aspires to be a full-fledged NFL general manager. They have to leave the New England nest as long as Belichick rules the roost. Or maybe they better said they can't leave the New England nest. Anyway, I'll stop there, but I guess mixed emotions. Caserio's done a great job with the Patriots. The Texans GM job would have been a great job for him. Bill O'Brien, the coach, he knows well, they're friends. But again, the Patriots, business is business. Nobody is kind of harder than the Patriots, and I guess that's a good reason why they've been the success they've been. So anyway, maybe a not surprising story coming out of Foxborough. I guess I'll end with just with the Red Sox. Again, Red Sox went down today. The Yankees came from behind. I'm not sure the Yankees had a homer today, but they set the major league record yesterday, at least, with homering in their 28th straight game. And I heard just the end, just a little bit of the post game of the Yankees game today. Yankees, again, I think came from behind yet again and beat, I guess, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, even with Chris Sale pitching, managed to lose to the White Sox. But John Sterling noted that the Yankees are about 6 games up on Tampa Bay at this point, and I think 9 games up on the Red Sox, 10 in the loss column. So, again, before the season, Red Sox and Yankees will slug it out. And the Red Sox at Fenway Park, I think they're an even 500, or maybe a game within being an even 500. I mentioned Stephen Wright's back. They'll have another body, I guess, for the bullpen. But again, coming back after an 80-game PED suspension, that following the 15-game domestic abuse, violence, whatever suspension. So, boy, kind of a cloud over his head. I guess Red Sox are happy to have a usually useful pitcher back, but not under the best of circumstances. But I don't know what to say about the Red Sox. Just kind of of course, they moved Andrew Benintendi up to leadoff. They just switched Mookie Betts back to the leadoff position a little while back, and that hasn't done much. I don't know what to say. As I've said a million times on this show, I haven't been particularly focused on the Red Sox. The Bruins just dominated my life for a while. I just haven't kind of kicked into the Red Sox, and again, I guess I'm not missing that much. It just has not been a noteworthy year. But again, as I heard Buster Olney say earlier today, talk about the past. I don't think a lot of Red Sox fans, are losing a ton of sleep, having had their incredibly magical year last year, winning the World Series and stuff. Hard to complain about the Red Sox. But boy, I think the thinking was, the Yankees certainly look like the obvious team to win the AL East at this point, and kudos for Tampa Bay, which we've talked about with the Montreal thing. Kudos to Tampa for hanging in there with their, a very small payroll against all odds, or again having a pretty good year. Red Sox, again, best team the money can buy, just barely over 500 at home. The season is exactly half over as of today, so I don't know what to say. I have no thoughts, but maybe they'll get the 1-game wild card. Maybe they won't. But anyway, the weekend I guess should be kind of fun. I guess what's really weird is a bunch of people have mentioned everybody in the major leagues always plays Friday, or typically Friday night, right? Well, guess what? Don't look for your Yankees or Red Sox to be playing this Friday night. They will not play Friday night, which is really weird. And they're not playing Friday night just because of the London thing. I assume they both had day games today. I would assume they're in the air now, probably going over to London today, if not today. Obviously by tomorrow morning, I assume. But again, they're off tomorrow and Friday, and game Saturday. I think the Saturday start is, a 1:10 start in London. 1:10 start our time. I think London time is 6 hours later. So it's an early afternoon game. I'm just checking the start time if I can find it. Early afternoon start time in London on Saturday, or early afternoon start time here, 1:10 p.m. And I think the Sunday morning start is, as I look at my papers here, I think the Sunday morning start is 10:10. Just if you're, obviously most folks out there are either Bruins or Yankees fans. Sorry, folks, as I'm still trying to dig that up, not very successfully it seems. So anyway, a couple of weekend games in London with the Red Sox and Yankees, but the Yanks have been the guys so far this year, and hey, kudos to the Yanks. They've had bordering on the magical season the Red Sox had last year, a ton of injuries, and Yankees keep coming up with great players, so it's quite the year. Anyway, I think you've probably heard enough of me tonight, but thanks for hanging in there. If you've been watching, thanks for Bobby for his great call, which I deeply appreciate. And again, no show next week, but we will see you 2 weeks hence, and I think I can guarantee you will see more people on the set. You will see, in fact, I think pretty good bet in 2 weeks. Go from just me tonight to myself, Nighthawk, and our friend Nick. So hopefully we'll go from 1 to 3 in a couple weeks. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hey, have a great, safe 4th of July coming up a week from tomorrow. Have a lot of folks will be traveling. Have a good 4th of July time. Again, great stuff around here. The great race is a week from Saturday down at the Bay Park. So safe travels and a happy 4th of July. And thanks to my man, Zach, for doing all the hard work around here. Okay, we'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks.